Here.
Cacciatore,
Here.
Carberry Montgomery,
Here.
Rosendahl,
Here.
and Kroll is absent.
Yes. All right. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Rosendahl, second by Carberry Montgomery. Discussion, roll call.
Rosendahl,
Yes.
Carberry Montgomery,
Yes.
Bodie,
Yes.
Cacciatore.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. That passes. We'll move on to the regular agenda, and that's to discuss the Sustainable Urbandale Action Plan. And I will turn it over to the interim city manager, Curtis Brown. Curtis?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm going to follow my notes here to keep us on track and then to make sure that I transmit some of these items before John Conyer gives a great presentation this morning on the action plan. So away we go. This is definitely an exciting step today and a great opportunity to put our plans into action. The Sustainable Urbandale Action Plan, we might refer to it over the course of the day as the SUOP or the Action Plan, was received by the council last September. And we will share with you a plan to begin that makes action on the sustainability plan in fact sustainable, so that our organization can continue to deliver on the points that is in it. In John's presentation, he will bring the council up to speed on some of the background and what's in the plan, and then end with how we're going to take this forward in the next few months and then ongoing. But before we get there, just a word about integrating sustainability into our operations. First, the staff, especially the city manager's office, understands the importance of integrating sustainability into our operations, and we understand the priority this is for the council. So I think it's important to clarify right at the beginning that we understand the priority that this is. By now, I've had the opportunity to spend nearly a workday accumulated with our incoming city manager, David Jones, who will begin on the 27th. And among the topics of discussion have been how to optimize the portfolio of the CMO staff to ensure that there's alignment in place to make sure that we're accomplishing the council's strategic objectives. The proposed FY26 budget, and in fact, the budget that we're in now, does have capacity for an additional member of the city manager's office, and that is a management analyst. So we believe the additional capacity that's created through a full-time professional is expected, and I do believe that we will shape it to help deliver success for the council's goals, including, especially relevant for today's discussion, including sustainability integration into the city operations. Of course, the exact form that takes will be pending the arrival and orientation of David, but I do have the confidence that this structuring to clarify roles and executing on the council's plans will be a top priority. So with that, I would take, if there's any questions or comments at this point. Otherwise, I think it would be helpful to allow John to orient the council on or reorient the council on the plans, some of the content of it, and then a proposed way forward. So, Mr. Mayor, I could take any comments or questions. Otherwise, allow John to take over with the presentation.
All right. Thanks, Curtis. Any questions at this point before John?
Yeah, I've got a question, Curtis.
Sure.
So just to clarify, you have talked to David specifically about the management analyst position that is budgeted to have already started. And
Right.
he
Yes.
is seemingly on board with moving forward with that.
With that full-time position?
Yes.
Right, yep.
Okay. I would, I have been anxious to get that job filled for many years. So,
Right.
I'm glad to hear that, and I hope that is, it takes a long time, as we know, to hire someone. So I'm hopeful that, the beginnings pieces of that can get started, in the near future after, his arrival.
Of course, and obviously, you're right. We've certainly discussed that this capacity exists now in this fiscal year and is planned going forward. It's just a matter of we need to give him the time to come in, get his bearings, and then work on putting that exact position description together. But certainly that's been part of our conversations.
Thank you.
Of course.
All right, with that, I think, John, time
Okay.
for you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Curtis. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and share. We did a test run earlier, so I believe you should all now see the Sustainable Urbandale Action Plan presentation. And so I'm going to go through here, kind of give us a brief overview of how we got to and how the plan was created, kind of what staff has been working on since your receiving of the plan back in September of the past year, and then kind of some action items to move us forward. So the Sustainable Urbandale Action Plan was an outgrowth of actually the work done prior with the University of Northern Iowa CEEE, which did our greenhouse gas emissions study, which actually looked at greenhouse gas emissions from 2020 and 2021. The plan was engaging for both residents, businesses, staff, and elected officials, and it was a true partnership with our utility provider, Mid-American Energy Company. And really, the plan looked with the ISU students for Department of Community and Regional Planning to really look at and come up with the questions and have a dialogue in place for things that one person can't tackle by themselves at any one point in time. The bulk of the work was completed through January and May of 2024. That included Chamber of Commerce events, library events, refugee and immigrants focus groups, forums for residents and businesses to attend. And then the ISU students also took a number of local and statewide tours to look at sustainable practices throughout the metro and then also throughout the state of Iowa. Since the council received it, staff has been working to come up with a plan forward, and kind of that's the culmination today with this presentation. So the Sustainable Urbandale Action Plan actually has 4 overarching goals, and those are people, renewable energy, net zero buildings, and then infill development. Do remember that the ISU students were in a planning class, so you'll see an awful lot of goals inside of infill, which is not a surprise, but they did branch out and make sure that as we look through stuff, how are we impacting the people that live and work and come to Urbandale? How do we focus on renewable energy? How do we make the things we build more net zero? And then most importantly, as we grow out, much like the Forward Urbandale Comprehensive Plan, how do we address infill and how we grow out and not just do urban sprawl? The goals are broken down A through J, and each goal has multiple action items. In total, there are 53 actionable items, and each one of those have subcomponents of them. So if you tally everything up together, it's over 80 different things that we could be working on at any one point in time. But we will just deal with the larger big 53 going forward. Each action item, the students really took the time to identify what are potential funding options or resources that Urbandale should be looking at to help make this action come to fruition. Other case studies, where have other places done similar projects, programs and ideas. So we don't have to create the wheel initially. We can leverage what others have done. Community engagement. What did the students hear when they were here and talking to people? Making sure that there was an equity and justice lens. And you heard from Professor Haddad that they wanted to make sure that they took that into account when this plan was drafted and then finalized, making sure that what we did today impacted people both in an equity and justice standpoint. And most importantly, that we have things in place to make sure that there are performance goals. So the actions that we take, we report back out to, letting our residents and businesses know that the things that we are achieving actually make a difference and that there's a way to have those both quantitative and qualitative metrics in place. They also knew with 53 different items that you had to break them down into things to focus on. So the short term in this goal is 1 to 2 years. The medium term is 3 to 5 years. And if you see something that's got an L or long term, that's a 5+ year goal. And you will see there are some things, if you read through the plan, that have an O, which is ongoing, things that we are working on today and that should be taken into account 5+ years moving forward. So how does the Sustainable Urbandale Action Plan fit into the landscape of where the council and where staff has been working on? We are down here in this structure here, and really everything comes from your strategic plan that you adopted last year, which is a 2-year plan for 24-25. Anything has to work inside of the capital improvements plan or the CIP. We have to budget for stuff, and definitely we have to take into account legislative impacts of things that either we would like to do or things that we would need to try to do and work around. And then we are working under 4+ major plans currently. So there is the Sustainable Urbandale Action Plan. You adopted a new comprehensive plan. In the works is the Downtown Urbandale Master Plan, and we're working through the Human Services Strategic Plan also. Those are just a few, and there's more out there, but there's a lot of plans that are in place. And so how do you make sure that you balance the resources that we can accomplish all of these and not just some of these moving forward? So staff had to take a point and say, what is the starting point? How do we start to eat the elephant, metaphorically speaking? And so you have to start somewhere. The great part is that the students came up with a starting point for us. And so they ranked the 53 action items based on the Cincinnati plan of 2023. And so each action item got a score ranging from 0 to 1, 0 being least priority and 1 being the highest priority. And you'll see here that the short-term action items, there's 16 of them, and half of them are higher priority goals, meaning they have a 0.5 or greater. Same thing with midterm, there's 16 actions, and then there's 8 of them that are high priority. There's more long-term action goals, there's 21 of them, and 5 of them are higher priority, which makes sense. So staff had to say, well, what's the best option to move forward? And definitely, I think to look at the short-term high priority action goals would be the place where we would want to start moving first. So short-term action goals, this is directly from the Sustainable Urbandale Action Plan document. You'll see those highlighted in yellow are those that were above 0.5, so that would be A2, A6, D4, E6, G1, G2, H1, and J4, and you'll hear a lot of those HAGs and number combinations. They refer back to an action item. So in this case, A2 is people, which would be enhance the city's website to provide residents with easy access to sustainable practices and low carbon solutions. And so each of these we had a chance to take a look at and say of those that were 0.5 or above, that's probably the best place to start and to look at which way to move forward. Now there are, if you count them up, there's 4 on this page and 4 on this page. That's 8 of them. That still is an awful lot to focus on in a short amount of time. So we needed to break that down further again. And so we said, let's look at 2. And let's see if we can work at 2 and then bite those off and then come back and find another 2 and then find another 2 and then work our way throughout the short-term list and then move ourselves on to the medium and then long-term action items. So the first proposed initial action item is A2, which is to enhance the city's website to provide residents easy access to sustainable practices and low carbon solutions. The plan identifies potential partners, potentially could be the Chamber of Commerce, Mid-American Energy Company, Iowa Economic Development, and I'm sure there are a lot more as we delve in and dive into what are things that could be part of that website that we will find more partners across the way. There was no additional funding resources identified. We could definitely take a look, but there's typically not many grants or outside pieces. But definitely, this is something that we budget for. We have a website, and this would be a sub website inside of that. So probably no additional funding needed from that standpoint. Community engagement. Uh, Really, it needs to be a two-way engagement piece. So typically we think of websites as being forward focused, but this does need to have feedback, suggestions, making sure that this is a place that people can engage and to provide feedback to Urbandale. Equity and justice, from that standpoint, they said that we should think about how do we translate or how do we make key pieces of the website out there for those that English may not be their first language. And then more importantly, how do we monitor the success of this action? And so uh, quantitative metrics could be number of visitors to the site, number of downloads or uses of the tools out there. And then the qualitative metrics is really do come back to that feedback loop piece of it. What do people tell us and what do they come back? So we had a chance to look at A2 and say, what is the natural fit inside of our current makeup? And so obviously, to no surprise, this is a comms and marketing piece. Derek Zarn, the director, oversees the website currently. So we sat down and had a discussion about, is this something that we could do? And Derek says most definitely. And so this is something that he could look to kick off and move in the first half of 2025. So this was one proposed action to work on out of the Sustainable Urbandale Action Plan. We did want to start with 2 to move forward out of those 8. And so the other one was to look at action G2, which would be to amend the zoning or property maintenance codes to classify the growth of native plants as permitted or by right. Potential partners here, the plan looks for ISU Extension, Master Gardeners, Blank Park Zoo, and their Plant Grow Fly. Um, Again, they didn't have specific funding resources identified here, but I do believe that there could be some out there, both at the state and the foundation level. Public meetings, hosting events throughout the change in ordinances. That's built into our process. Currently, you would have public hearings, and then equity and justice, making sure that if you are going to have meetings or things of that nature, that we may think about compensation or ways for people to engage that may not be just show up to a council meeting. And then a case study here was actually the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources did a native planning piece in 2022-2023. So there is a starting point here to look at. Metrics, again, a number of properties that implement native plants. You could look at variances for people asking questions. How would it change flooding events or stormwater runoff? Again, feedback, and this plan has a lot of feedback pieces to it, making sure that there's a feedback for focus groups, that we're out there talking to the residents and businesses out there about this is why it's important to do it. And then again, testimonials through engagements across the way. G2, obviously with zoning and property maintenance, falls into the community development. So talk with Director Steve Franklin and his staff. And this is again one that they could definitely work on and look at making changes and proposed both through the zoning and property maintenance ordinance in the first half of 2025. So kind of what are the next steps? If we take those 2 proposals, we do want to highlight G1, and G1 was actually to change the parking regulations to allow more parking, to allow less parking spaces and more additional green spaces. And that was actually completed by council back on November 19th of 24 with ordinance 2416. We did adopt and change the parking regulations. Christy and Steve worked on that and championed that through the P&Z Commission and then ultimately through the 3 reading process for City Council. Talking with Derek, he believes that they could start to work on A2, the new website, starting in March. Oh, and that would take probably through middle to the end of May to implement. Talking with Steve and Christy in community development, they believe that they could start here in February on looking at native species and how to make those into the property maintenance and zoning code, and probably finish up by providing something to the council for ordinances in July of 25. So those would be our first 2 pieces kind of between now, January through July. And then we would come back to council in August with another 2 selected items. That could either be from the short list, it could be from the medium list, or it could be from things that you as the mayor and council say, we would like to elevate and to move these forward and to work on those instead. They don't need to be those 0.5 and higher, but that's where we'll start because those got the highest rankings out of the action plan. I'm going to take a short pause to grab a quick drink of water so I don't get too raspy here, and also give you all a chance to ask any questions before we go into the next section of the presentation, which is kind of where are the rest of the action items moving forward.
Well, I may be jumping ahead to that section, John, but I know that the food pantry is seriously contemplating and maybe already really committed to doing a community garden in the space behind their new facility. So I would like to see us figure out how we can support that, as well as, you know, I don't know, monitor sounds heavy handed, but, you know, use it as a guide for us to possibly, you know, find more spaces at churches and other nonprofits or things like that. But I think that one would be, we would be remiss if we weren't having that at least on the radar of things we're watching.
Yes, Bridget, definitely. I do know through the Human Services Committee work that I've been working on that I know that they are working on that garden there as part of their new food pantry location. And definitely, yeah, that is one that we could work with, you know, and make sure that we are aware of, and then almost use that as a, here is a best practice for what are things that we could look at for other places to add religious or nonprofit groups, or even look at city locations of these are places that we could do those. And that would fall into there is not a specific action item inside of the plan that expressly deals with that, but that's part of an action item that we could make that all part of that same action item.
I just want to make sure, I mean, I think it's low enough work level that I think it could easily be looped into something. I just want to make sure that we're keeping it on our radar, because I mean, for me, that's the community garden concept is one of the things that I'm most excited about coming out of this. So
we can
sounds
definitely,
like we can incorporate it somehow into monitoring and those sorts of things.
we can definitely, yes.
I'd like to ask a question about G2.
Sure.
Do we have restrictions on native plants? I'm a little wondering about the ordinance piece.
You know, Pat, that's a great question. As we talk with Steve and Chrissy, we don't believe that there's restrictions on native plants currently. However, we do believe that there are things that we would want to look at to potentially incentivize or to make better known that these are the benefits for native plants, especially if you're looking at business berming And then also too, from the property maintenance code perspective of letting people know this is what would be permitted, this is what would not be permitted, and making sure that people understand that clearly and that they're engaged and want to do it instead of just having it inside of a code that they don't understand.
Well, some of my thoughts related to G2 are the fact that we're doing this natural resources management study on our own properties, on some of our own land in the park system might be informative ultimately to even businesses as we look at what we're trying to protect and how we're going to be trying to protect it through that planning. And that might be something that can get translated back into the website that Derek's putting together once that's ready to go. And then similarly, we've got a lot of programming through water with rain garden programs and things like that that can be a piece of that. And I was even thinking in terms of some of the higher priorities in the short-term action, I think D4, E6, those are related to net zero energy, but they're around certification and things like that, providing some level of linkage and information about some of those things can be helpful. And again, start movement on those priorities, even though we can't necessarily embrace the whole of them yet. And I do know of some people who have already started doing some level of research on businesses in Urbandale that have made progress on their energy efficiency. And so the idea of putting that together in a web form or video form to put on the web is something we can probably do relatively easy. And I think that's E6 if I'm looking at this right. Yeah.
Yes, it is. You are correct. Yes. Yeah, I really do believe that A2 will have the avenue to encompass a lot of additional action as we move forward.
Yeah.
Without any other questions here, wanted to provide you kind of, yep, sorry, Blake. Go right ahead, sir.
You're good. So when it comes to G2, I like the idea here, and I think to kind of enhance that with beyond just an amending of, like, I think this could be a really good opportunity to tie into the seed library we have at the library to basically say, okay, like we're going to be amending to classify and understand how native growth works in private property and the maintenance code around that, but then taking it one step further, saying this is how you can do native plantings. Here's some things that you need to watch out for, because if you just throw seed down, probably not going to be considered native planting per se if you don't take care of it in certain ways and pay attention to it. So having some sort of thing that we can give folks to say, hey, this is kind of what we're thinking about when we do these type of changes, and this is what we would like to encourage. And then if there is an interest with the seed library, maybe even stocking native seed mixes that we'd recommend too, because then there's folks that can say, okay, I've got 60 square feet or whatever, or 100 square feet that I want to do this in. Let's see what, like, is there like either a reduced rate that people can buy seed mixes from, or, you know, what does that look like?
Blake, I think those are great ideas. I do know when Stephen Christie and I talked with Curtis, you know, I think one of the first things that will come out of this is how do you define native plants? What exactly does that mean for Urbandale? You know, because I think, you know, that's open to interpretation if you don't define it, and that could lead to a number of issues. And so I know that they will be working hard to make sure that they identify that and that there is a consistent message out there. I do like the seed library piece, you know, even if it's not with them, through other partners, that here are, you know, mixes that you could use based on light, location, soil, water, all of that stuff, to make sure that we're providing resources out there, you know, that people can tap into and do.
Yeah, there's a ton of existing material on this that we could definitely link people to.
And if you have that and would love to share that, you know, as we work on this, you know, we welcome resources, and, you know, that's a great way for us to make sure, do we know about that? And if not, then we can definitely make sure that we add that to the list of stuff that we put together.
Yeah, and I have a contact for you from the private lands biologist at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. There may even be some funding. They tend to do technical assistance on projects, but there might also be some seed funding and things like that. We'll be in touch on that, John.
Nope, that's great. Thank you, Pat. Any other questions? No, then I am going to move forward. So wanted to give you a kind of an overview of operational integration. And what that means is, what are the things that are inside of the Sustainable Urbandale Action Plan that are also being done through other city programs or policies or other things that we are working on throughout the way? So if you look at G6, which is a rebate program to incentivize planting native species, we do have the stormwater grant and the rain barrel program, as well as I know the tree board works with the Parks and Rec department to work on recommended trees, so that's a piece of it. It's not all of it, but it's a piece of it. And so here across the way, wanted to give a breakdown of short-term actions in kind of a way, upgrading wayfinding signage along paths and roadways. That's part of the Complete Streets Master Plan as well as the parks budget. So I won't read through all of these, but there's several pages both on the short term and then on the midterm action items, and then on the long-term ones, that these are things that we came up with in the last month or so that we could tie and link back to. They are not all inclusive. You may think of others and go, I know the city's doing this, or there's something out there. We would love to have that and make sure that we could expand upon this list also, but wanted to make sure that you knew that we are trying to integrate this plan inside of things that we do already, and that we are moving the plan forward. And kind of one last piece of it was to give you a little bit of milestones that probably you may or may not know about. Stormwater grant program is out there, rain barrel reimbursement. The city awarded a solar feasibility study, which is kicking off here, I believe, this month. I have a meeting either this week or next week to talk about that with the consultant and Dick Lilly out of our facilities group. And then also too, I know the council's direction has been to diversify our city fleet, to use more hybrid and electric vehicles. So here's a short breakdown I got from Patrick Halsey, our fleet supervisor, of kind of what do we have for a hybrid and electric fleet. So we have 21 hybrid, and here they are in the percent per department. And then also we have 3 electric vehicles currently in fire, facilities, and recreation, and what that means for their total fleet operations. So I've given you a whole bunch of information in a very short amount of time. I told Curtis I would not take the full hour. I was like, this presentation's pretty short, but I wanted to make sure that you all had a chance to ask questions, and then more importantly, have some discussion too, if you want to, about is this the right approach, or what should we be thinking about to modify, or actions that we should be taking next if they're not in line with what you've seen today.
Well, I'd just like to comment that the sustainability coordinator position is in the plan, but it's a long-term position and long-term goal and low rated. I tried to read through all their math on how they were prioritizing with their numbers. And I have to say, I got a little bit lost in the weeds on that. I think for us, I can't speak for the rest of the council, but for me, having someone share your burden, John, on trying to make sure all these things happen would maybe be a higher priority than the Sustainable Urbandale Action Plan listed it as. I think that would be maybe one of the number one things I'd like to see happen, is that we have some additional support for this work. But approach-wise, I would have done the same thing, go through and set a bar and look at them. But there's a few I think that they may have ranked oddly compared to what we might want to do. And so I think we're going to need to apply that frame as well.
John, if you'll allow me just one moment, and Pat, I'll address that again. coming back to my introductory comments, I think if the council is willing to give the city manager's office some space to look at when we're at full capacity and have that next full-time professional working in the office, how can we manage the portfolio across all of us to ensure that we're optimized and aligned with regard to the city council strategic objectives in the plan. So I'll be bold enough to say I have a confidence that I think precisely what you're talking about, how to make sure, because it's obviously it's a heavy lift, all this operational integration. And you've seen here, I think John did an excellent job of showing how this is woven throughout the organization, but how do we keep moving that forward and then track the progress we're making? So I just want to affirm that it's a point well taken. And I think if you and the council are willing to give us some time to look at this, and I don't mean a lot of time, like several months time, I think we can get there with a structure that you'll be pleased with.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I do think we need to give, David the opportunity to get in and to look at this as well and to get his thoughts on how we implement this moving forward too. So I agree with Curtis's comments and approach to this. So.
Me too.
And John, if you have a additional comment on that, I didn't mean to jump in. You're doing a fantastic job here.
Nope, that one's all you, sir.
Got it.
I did have one thought when I was reading through some of the goals, and I noticed the goal F1 was talking about, I don't remember if it was a medium term or a long term. I know it wasn't a short term. Regarding bioswales in the like street projects, I think that kind of ties into kind of what I had mentioned previously when we talk about stormwater management projects, where we're taking the whole street out to put in to put in stormwater management, where we should also keep in mind areas or ways to do traffic calming and different ways to kind of slow folks down as they go through the neighborhoods there. I think whenever we do some of those total rip out situations, this is a really good opportunity for us to consider that stormwater management beyond just laying the pipes as well. And I think as we do this, it kind of creates a playbook for us too, of saying, okay, like what kind of traffic calming measures do we want to prescribe as kind of our standard? What kind of stormwater management, both above ground and below ground, do we want to put as our standard when we do these types of projects? Because then it kind of runs itself to a certain extent to say, yeah, we want to consider these 3 things when we're redoing some of these streets as a full tear out.
And I might add, this applies to new pavement as well. Anything that we're building out in advance, this should just be a matter of course of integration of these sorts of things for the future, I think.
Yeah,
I agree.
Hopefully you all got to see how pretty these were out in my neck of the woods in Clive and elsewhere. I know I made some comments at council meetings about the ones on Meredith or the south side of Meredith approaching Alice's Road on the Clive side. Brought a lot of joy on my daily drives to school with the kids.
I think if you look at it from the residential side too, Bridget, like the Clark, I think it's Clark Street or Clark Avenue in Clive, in between 100th and
I couldn't find it if my life depended on it, but I know what you're talking about.
in that clinic, there's like the 2, like if you're going south on 100th, you turn right onto Clark, there's 2 traffic circles. And I'm not saying we have to institute traffic circles in residential areas, but I'm saying there's 2 traffic circles. And then there's a series of kind of calming measures that the curb kind of goes in and out when it comes to the front of the street, but there's also like kind of rain garden detention areas between the sidewalk and the curb too. Those are kind of interesting examples to look at as well of how do you kind of holistically integrate all of those things into a residential environment. And obviously we've got right of way issues to deal with and things like that. And so there may be variations of it, but something to consider.
I know, council, that Curtis was taking notes as well as I was, and I mean, and definitely F1 could be something that we start to lay the seed work and groundwork for with both engineering, public works, and with Parks and Rec, and maybe that's a next to item moving forward that we can say, hey, this is expressed interest in, and then how do we actually bring that forward?
That would actually sync up with our CIP development as well.
Yeah, I think that's just something good to think about when those get priced out and considerations for that.
I think that could be really important, maybe a little bit of a game changer for all the development that comes in to the west in particular.
Any other ideas or discussion points?
This is exciting. I'll say it. It's very exciting to see some of these come up and start biting off pieces. I know we need to be intentional about our prioritization, and so that's I appreciate you guys bringing a few forward to look at and focus on as we kind of march into this new year.
Yeah, and I think in addition to the way you've gone about this so far, which I think is outstanding, the other thing is as these studies come in, the natural resources land management piece and the solar renewable energy piece, as those come in, that might help us pull out other things because we'll see some priorities from there, and then that can kind of match up probably in some places. And there's so much existing material that some of it's just a matter of compiling the links in one place and publicizing that they're there, especially when it comes to some of the native plantings and the rain garden management and things like that. And I certainly can help find and locate some of those resources if we're needing those.
Well, thank you, Pat. And I did throw back to kind of the planned landscape here, because I do believe a lot of the action falls into what we're already doing. Forward Urbandale Comprehensive Plan, Downtown Plan, you will see a lot of these pieces come back to you in different shapes and ways, but with the same underlying theme of this is how you can be more sustainable moving forward.
Yeah. Well, and all the complete streets work fits into this. I think they've even got some goals related to complete streets, if I remember right. But all of that fits in there too. So.
Then I guess I will close in saying I know the students at ISU definitely do check in every now and again, as well as Professor Haddad. So they were happy that you were discussing this today. And that they definitely stop in and ask questions about what does council think and where is this plan moving forward. I know they were incredibly happy to work with us and proud of what came out of their work. And I would echo that too. They were a great group to work with, and they gave us a lot of things to think about, and things that we can definitely put into place and make Urbandale a better place to live and work. That's all I have, Curtis. I will turn the floor back over to you, sir.
That's it, and I'll toss it right back to the mayor. Thanks, everybody, for the time today.
You muted, Bob.
Just noticed. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Curtis and John, for the presentation and the great comments. If there's nothing else, we are at the end of our agenda. We are adjourned. I'll give you back a break. Do you have something, Blake? Sorry.
Yeah, I just had a question of this doesn't need to be a discussion topic, but I was just curious when we get the budget book.
We are working on that, and I think, is Nikki on here? I'm going to go. Yep, there we go. Are we on track for next week, Nikki?
The full
Week of the 27th.
Yeah, you'll have them for at least a full week. We just got debt numbers yesterday or Friday that I'm working through right now, so we're just kind of trying to tie everything.
Thanks for jumping in.
Thank you.
All right. All right, you get almost a half hour back of your day that you weren't expecting. So thanks everybody for participating, and we stand adjourned. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.